Today, Maseches Shabbos Kodesh. Today's limud for the fourth day of Chodesh Adar. We are learning Daf Kuf Tes Amud Beis, starting from where we left off, more or less. Kuf Tes Amud Aleph, about 6 lines from the bottom of the page, 3 words from the end of the line, talking about the size of a revius. Says the Gemara as follows: Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Revius shall Torah, the Revius in the Torah, Revius Midaraisa. How big is that volume? Says Rav Chisda, I'll tell you how big it is. It is Etzba'im, Al Etzba'im, Barum Etzba'im, V'chetzi, Etzba, V'chomish Etzba. Says Rav Chisda, it is the size of 2 Etzba'os by 2 Etzba'os, by, that's the width and the length, by, to make volume, 2 and a half and a fifth of an Etzba, so 2.7 etzba'os. So 2.2 by 2.7 etzba'os, which comes out to be 10.8 cubic etzba'os. That's the size of the revius. Now, how big is that in our measurements? We'll get there in a moment. But before we can explain that, there is the brisa that's going to prove this, and for this we're going to need a little bit of math. It says the brisa as follows: Kidatanya, like the brisa tells us. This is Chisda's proof. Verachatz b'mayim is kol b'saray. The pasuk in Vayikra tells us that to become tahor, you have to immerse your entire body in a mikveh. Din number 1 in the brisa, shaloi he davar chaytzis bein b'saray l'mayim, that you have to make sure that there is no chatzitza. There's nothing. I think the English word is to interpose. That's the word for chatzitza, something that comes in between your skin and water. That's a chatzitza. You cannot have that between your body and the water. Okay, b'mayim, chatzis kol b'saray, that's all of your body. B'mayim, in water. B'mei mikveh, in the waters of the mikveh. As kol b'saray, all of your body, all of his body. That's what the pasuk says. Which means, how big is the mikveh? Mayim shekol gufay oile bahen, water in which the entirety of the body can fit in it. And now the brisa tells us how big is the size of a mikveh that the average body can fit in. V'kamahin, how much is this? Says the Gemara Kuf Tes Amud Beis, which is our Amud for today. It is the size of Amma al Amma Barum Shalosh Amas, which is an Amma by an Amma, 1 cubic Amma, so 1 Amma by 1 Amma. That's the length of the base, by 3 Amas high. 3 cubic Amas. That is the size of a mikveh. Now, the Rishonim point out here that ostensibly what you would need is a pit that is an extra Amma high, so that when the person goes in, the water would be able to, there's displacement, so the water will be able to cover their head. But the amount of liquid that you require there to be over there is going to be 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 ammas, which means 3 cubic ammas. And here comes our math. V'shir chachamim, and the chachamim told us how much water is in 3 cubic ammas. That is shir chachamim shir mei mikveh arba'im sa'ah. The chachamim pointed out that the size of this mikveh, which is an amma by 3 ammas, is 40 sa'ah. Now, here's where the math comes in. 1 sa'ah works out to be 6 kavin. And 1 kav is 4 lugin, and 1 revius is, and 1 lug is 4 revius. So it comes out that 1 amma is 6 tefachim, and 1 tefach is 4 etzba'os. And based on this, Rav Chisda comes to his mathematical conclusion, which is that 1 sa'ah comes out to 96 revius. That's where the math comes out, which means that 1 cubic amma is equal to 243 cubic etzba'os, which is where he gets his math, that once you convert from ammas to etzba'os, you're going to end up with a revius being 2 by 2 by 2.7 etzba'os. That's the volume of revius converted into cubic etzba'os, and that's his math. Now, based on this, Rav Ashi has a question. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar li Ravin bar Chanina Bar China. Rabbi Bar China asked me the following question: Shulchan shel Mikdash shel Parkim Haba. The Shulchan of the Beis Hamikdash must have been made up, and this is jackpot for today's Kriyas HaTorah, Parshas Truma. Shulchan shel Mikdash, the Shulchan of the Beis Hamikdash, had to have been made up in pieces, meaning it needed to have been able to be broken into pieces. Why? The Isal Kedaitach, because if you would imagine, Haduke Hava Mehadek, that it was all attached in one piece and it couldn't be taken apart. So Amsa ba'amsa Heichi Metable, and the Shulchan of the Beis Hamikdash was 1 amma by 1 amma. And if it ever became tummy, it would need to be toveled, and it would need to be toveled. And this is the caveat here that Rishonim point out, that it would need to be toveled in the Beis Hamikdash because the lechem apanim had to be on constantly, except for the moment that the lechem apanim was switched out, which meant that there might have been a moment that you had after taking off one set of lechem apanim that you could tovel it if the shulchan ever became tummy. And it needed to have been toveled in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara in Yomi tells us that the mikveh that was in the Beis Hamikdash was 1 amma by 1 amma. That's what the Gemara says in Yomi Lamed Aleph, that you needed to be able to tovel, because the Kohen needed to be able to tovel on Yom Kippur. So they would have a mikveh in the Beis Hamikdash that was 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 ammas deep. And the shulchan would not have been able to fit there because the shulchan was 1 amma by 1 amma, which means 1 amma by 1 amma would not be able to be toveled in something that was 1 amma by 1 amma. You would never be able to tovel it because you cannot have something that is exactly the size of an amma fitting into something that's exactly the size of an amma. You need a little bit of wiggle room in order to make it work. And therefore, the Shulchan of the Beis Hamikdash needed to have been able to be broken up into pieces. Says the Gemara, my kusha. No problem. It's true that the mikveh that was there was 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 ammas, but there was another mikveh. Maybe they would have been able to be toveled in the Yam Shel Shlema. What's the Yam Shel Shlema? Yam Shel Shlema, the Pesukim describe that Shlomo Melech made a yam. Yam literally means a sea. It was very big. A big pool of water. Big pool of water on the top of the Eichel. How did it work? So you had a big basin and it was filled up with water. How much water was there? A tremendous amount. The Tana Ruchia said, Yam Shal Shalom, the sea, which Shlomo Melech made, this pool that Shlomo Melech made, Machzik 150 mikvah tahara. It held 150 mikvahs, each mikvah being 40 sa'ah, so it was very big. Could you tovel the shulchan in it in one piece? Yeah, absolutely. You could tovel a lot of shulchans in there all at once. Says the Gemara, okay. So that is our question about the size of revius. How does this work in terms of today? So part of the conundrum that exists, and this was raised by the Tzlach, and this became the food for many, many conversations, is the Rashbam here points out that the size of a beitza, the size of a revius is 1.5 beitzas, 1.5 eggs. Now, if you do the calculation of the size of our eggs today, comparing it to the size of our fingers today, you come out that either our fingers have grown much larger or our eggs have grown much smaller. Now, to be able to say that our fingers have grown much larger is a little bit peculiar because I suppose we have archaeological evidence to say that our fingers have not grown bigger. We have bones from the days of Chazal. There's bones that you can see. Fingers have not grown immensely larger since then. So the Tzlach makes the argument that our eggs must be smaller than the eggs that exist in the time of Chazal, and this becomes the whole discussion about whether the shiurim that we have today are accurate or not into the size of the eggs and olives that Chazal was speaking about when they spoke about kazesim and kibetzas. And to this end, you get the large shear of kazayis and kibetza based on this conundrum, based on this concern from Gemara. And on the flip side, you have the shittas that are much more makel in terms of the sizes. Now, the Tzlach points out that we are only machmer for these shittas, we are not makel for these shittas. So when we talk about, for example, how much a person would be allowed to eat on Yom Kippur, so we are going to be machmer to take the smaller size of the shiurim. And when we talk about how much matzah you have to eat, so the Chazon Ish family famously held that you must take the larger shear, especially when it comes to dinim de oraisa. And that's more or less where the question arises. based on how big our eggs are. We should point out, and point to the Sadman Ishurim in different points in time, that none of us have ever seen a average size egg, because when you go to the store, you buy large, extra large, or jumbo size eggs. What happens to all the medium and small eggs? So the medium and the small eggs, those are used in industry. They are not used to be sold commercially. So you cannot find small eggs or medium eggs. Now, the medium size of an egg, or the mean of the size of an egg, is smaller than what you normatively see in the store. But the range basically works out, we'll say it in milliliters, because that's where most of the poskim are a little bit more exacting in. The size of a revius is somewhere between 86 milliliters and 150 milliliters. That's what you see by Israeli poskim. We usually say it's somewhere between 3 and 5 ounces. My recommendation always, when it comes to Pesach, is to get yourself if you want to be machmer for all of the days, the best thing to do, based on the Gemaras and the Taisasim that we saw before, is to get yourself a 5-ounce cup. So I can put some links into the chat for those that are interested for which cups I recommend for Pesach. Make sure that you have revius glasses, even according to the Chasam, Sefer, and I'll give some options according to the smaller shit by Reb Chaim Noah as well. And for those that are interested, I'll also put some links down here with regards to figuring out what the what the calculations are for the better calculations to be using if you ever want to calculate between etzbaos and revius. And there's a Torah Talmudic calculator between ounces and milliliters and revius and etzbaos and amos and tvachim and everything. Both of them are very good to see. Take a look. Okay. Then the Mishnah told us that you're not allowed to have less than 4 cups. And now the Gemara is going to ask a question about having 4 cups of wine. The Chacham said you have to drink 4 cups of wine. And it's very clear, the Gemara is going to say, that the Rabbanan instituted that we should be drinking these 4 cups of wine. It's not a din d'oraisa. And the Gemara has the following question. How can you do something? How can the Rabbanan institute something that is going to be dangerous? What's dangerous? We have a brayso that says, that a person should not eat in pairs, meaning 2 of something, and shouldn't drink in pairs of something, meaning you can have a chavrusa, but not that each person has 2 drinks or 4 drinks. He shouldn't wipe himself twice, and he shouldn't be intimate with his wife twice. Now the Achronim point out that seems to be problematic, because Chazal also point out, the Gemara tells us that a person that wants to be Zohar to Banim Zcharim should be Baal V'Yishna V'Yival, meaning he should be with his wife and then be with his wife again in the same night, and then he'll be Zohar to Banim Zcharim. So they point out that for the sake of a mitzvah, that would be mutter. But in general, there is a sakana in having things in 2s. How could it be that the Chacham instituted that we can have 2s? Now, what's the deal with 2? So Rabbeinu B'chaya has a long arichas, and Maral has arichas, and there's a lot to say about this. Then in the days of the Chazal, there was a deep concern about doing things in pairs, because that was the antithesis of monotheism. Monotheism is that there is one God. And all of the Zoroastrians and the polytheists and the pantheists that believed in dualities of things and multiplicities of things believe that everything must be done in 2s, because there's no such thing as one. The Chiddush of Yadus is there's only one. There's only one God, and the all of the people that believed in deism and the Tao and Tao and all the other dharma and karma and shawarma, whatever things people believe in, is more than one. And specifically, the thing that is more than one is 2. And that is the essence of Avodah Zarah, is thinking that there is more than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore the Avodah Zarah would always make sure that they had 2 things. And that was a sakana. There was a sakana which seemed to be a sakana because of mazikin, and also because it made a person susceptible to curses and magic that existed in the days of Chazal. Big machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban whether this was real or this was fake. But either which way, Chazal were concerned for what this is or what it looked like it was. And therefore, the Gemara's question is, how could Chazal institute that you are supposed to have 4 cups of wine? That is 2 pairs of 2. That is antithetical to the idea of monotheism. Amr of Nachman says of Nachman, I'll tell you what. Amr the pasuk says, Leil Shimurim, that this night is a night of guarding, of watching. Leil HaMeshuvim Uba Min HaMazikin, that tonight is a night that is warded off from all damages, and we're not worried about doing things in Zukkos. Rava says, no. I'll tell you why. Because you drink one cup, and then you drink another cup, and then you drink a third cup. That's the cup that you bench on. So you have Kiddush, and then you have for Magid, and then you have for benching. Now you have 3 cups. 3 cups is great. And that third cup is not also going to join with the 4th cup for something negative. That would be another 1 cup. It's 3 and 1. It's not 2 and 2. So that would be your 4 cups of wine. Ravina says, I'll tell you why it's not a problem. Because that the Rabbanan instituted these 4 cups of derech cheres as a way of symbolizing our freedom. Kol chad v'chad, each and every cup, turning over the page to Kuf Yud, mitzvah ba'an benafshehu. Each one is an independent mitzvah. So it's not 2 and 2. It is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. That's it. There's no 2 and 2. So either we're not worried about it because there's no Masikin, or we're not worried about it because it is 3 and 1, or because there's 1 and 1 and 1 and 1, we're not worried about it. Okay. And therefore, there is no concern about Zukkos. Now, on Daf Kufyut, which we're going to see tomorrow, we're going to continue with the discussion of Zukkos. Pesachim Barach. Looking forward to seeing everybody and wishing you all a Shavua Tov Mevarach. Pesachim Barach, getting deeper into the sugyas of Leil Seder and all of the things that are, please God, going to enhance our Pesach as we head towards the end of the Masechta. Pesachim Barach. So for those that are a little bit behind, please God, you should catch up, and we'll see you later.